Big news over coming days as we look to the weekend is the departure of the Prime Minister for Washington. I want to bring in former Cabinet Minister, former Defence Minister, and someone who knows how the talks will be unfolding behind the scenes on defence funding, the alliance and so on, is Joel Fitzgibbon. He joins us live. Joel, as we have the discussion about whether Australia should have peacekeepers in Gaza as part of an international force, that's happening on one side. On the other, there is just, I guess, the diplomatic push by Jim Chalmers, Pat Conroy, all in Washington now, really laying the foundations for Mr Albanese's visit.
As it's relevant, Kieran, can I just very quickly extend my sympathies and best wishes to the family, friends and battalion colleagues of young Tulsa Rumney, the soldier we lost just outside Townsville this week. It's a terrible tragedy, and I probably extend my offer to the family to speak with them if they believe I can help, because, as you know, me and my family have been through the same thing relatively recently. But on the visit, Kieran, critically important. It has to be seen in context, of course. You can see Donald Trump dealing with Russia, Ukraine, still dealing with Israel-Palestine, now dealing with increasing and rising tensions between the US and China. So he'll have a pretty full book next week, Donald Trump. But a meeting with the Australian Prime Minister is always important. I think the Prime Minister goes there in very good shape, and he should be confident of a good meeting. There's a lot happening in that defence space, including, of course, in Israel. I think Israel and Palestine, I think we should be making a contribution. And I've no doubt Joint Ops Command will be working up options for the government as we speak. But we're doing a lot in defence, investing more in defence here in Australia, investing more in our defence industrial base. We are investing in the US industrial base, in particular in the Virginia-class submarine production base. And of course, the big one is critical minerals. I think the Prime Minister will go to Washington with a package which will help the US and it's over the world, really. The world's over-reliance on China for critical minerals and rare earths. And I've no doubt those discussions are well advanced already ahead of the meeting. And I think that will be a great strength for our Prime Minister.
And yes, and I'm sure our viewers and all those concerned would appreciate your generosity as well of spirit in offering your time and to speak to the family concerned in that tragedy this week. I know the Defence Minister's office watches this program. You obviously very close to Richard Marles yourself, so I'm sure that will happen at an appropriate time, Joel. We're talking about one of the best militaries in the world in our military, and also one that has had a lot of experience in peacekeeping and stabilisation. So it's not just sort of saying, yes, we'll put our hand up. We're talking about some of the best, aren't we?
I have, by the way, reached out to the Acting Prime Minister, Kieran, seeking an opportunity to make contact with the family, and I'm sure I'll be provided that opportunity at the appropriate time. Yeah, we are very experienced in both peacemaking and peacekeeping. Of course, importantly, this would be defined as a peacekeeping operation. In other words, slightly lower risk. And we are well placed, we're well experienced, we have good capability. And these are, in fact, training exercises too, Kieran. It's good for our troops who spend a lot of time training to have the opportunity to deploy, to travel, and to put their skills into operation. So it's all upside, I think, for the government. And of course, it would be all upside with respect to our relationship with Washington.
And so in terms of the meeting, it's going to happen, we'll speak next week around the time of it, but there's a lot of anticipation for this thing, and it might only be, 10, 15 minutes of public sort of face time of this, but it's an important little quarter of an hour.
Yeah, of course it is. And again, in context, the President will have a lot on his plate over those couple of days. The Prime Minister is in Washington. But I think I go back to that critical minerals issue. Rising global tensions, less uncertainty in our world, a constant threat of miscalculation, which could lead to conflict. So our investment in defence has never been more important. It's becoming, of course, more high tech, and with more high tech comes greater need for critical minerals and rare earths. Australia has, great deposits of these products. It makes us very important to the United States, arguably more important than ever before. We are further enmeshing our defence forces with the Virginia-class submarines coming through Perth, rotational forces through Northern Australia. So we need the United States for many reasons. It's an important relationship and alliance, but we are pretty important to them as well. And I've no doubt that President Trump understands that.
This week we saw the jobs numbers, a bit of a spike in the unemployment rate. Expectations now of another rate cut before the end of the year. What's your read on where the economy's at now that you've been doing quite a bit in the business community?
Well, it would have come as a surprise to Treasury, to the Reserve Bank, and indeed to the markets. It wasn't anticipated. And the discussion around this, unsurprisingly, Kieran, is about interest rates. And it's good news because it's more likely now that the RBA might go for another small rate cut next time it meets. But I think the other interesting thing lies behind the numbers, and that's what happened here. And what happened here is that we haven't seen the growth in this quarter in the sort of non-market sector. If you like, that sector which produces jobs funded by government, NDIS is a perfect example. So we've been relying on the non-market sector to provide employment growth. And what's happened, of course, is the public sector has been crowding out the private sector. The growth hasn't occurred in the private sector because people making investment decisions are asking themselves where the labour is coming from and what price it might pay for that labour. So if the government's starting to wean itself off investment in the public sector in terms of these social welfare programs, that will be a good thing as long as the private sector moves and starts to invest in projects which create jobs.
And just before you go, the super backflip, was that a good outcome in the end, despite it being a bit messy for the Treasurer?
Yeah, a bit messy for the Treasurer, but in the end, I think the government did the right thing. It's interesting because they were well placed now to put this legislation through the Senate, something they were unable to do prior to the election. But I always had very strong misgivings, Kieran, about taxing unrealised capital gains. So I think common sense has prevailed, and I joined the overwhelming majority who support and welcome that back down.
Joel Fitzgibbon, great to see you. We'll see you early next week around the visit of the Prime Minister to Washington.